pictures with her love note in his sock drawer. So you can derive from that a lot of the book has to do with my parents, my late parents, and but not all of it. There's actually I sort of think on the side sneak in a couple of seasonal cycle sets of poems. And this one, I'll read one. This actually was written in March of last year, or April, I think, of last year. So it has that kind of early pandemic feel to it. And by the way, I am noticing these green lights in my glasses. I can't really do much about that. That's my desk lamp, and I need that light, but you know, it makes this weird green light, so there we are. All right. Okay, this is titled Easter. 1. Easter morning, with twig ends bare as every April, every homely spring. Only the most impatient leaf buds expose themselves near a month after equinox, blossoming muted, my roots not to this rhythm. Our meek city lot's wildlife persists, squirrels, sparrows, pigeons. We point and exclaim at a novelty, a goldfinch at the feeder. Its little body tints the entire yard. Here the season doesn't know florist window eruptions. We settle with gratitude for each day's next appearance of unmuzzled color. This time through, the old blue above us, we flock as faces gridded across indoor screens. More faces arrive, thicken to mosaic. Shared sunshine fingers each background. This one's library, that one's kitchen. On Sunday, we inhale morning walks through the park, cast side looks at each other's face masks, flamboyant or demure. We not only dress in layers, but we breathe through them in the Easter parade talismans wrapped against our lungs' lockdown. The next one is one of the poems about my mother, who eventually succumbed to complications from multiple sclerosis. But this poem is some years before that. She was a great lover of music, of choral music, and one of her great loves was The Sound of Music, that musical. And there was a time when my parents got to Austria and got to a really potent site in the Austrian Alps. So this comes from that. We have a photograph of it. Meadowtop, 2006. Mother's arms flow a wide beeline, spread from her shoulders like hawk wings. Jacket of patchwork and bands, snow-toned cobalt blue. Loose sleeves gather mountain sky. Dad's lens mirrors her hues with the Austrian Alps, a screenplay in layers of mantles behind her. Glasses and smile canted to sunlight, grass anchored, heart quiet. After Julie Andrews wheeled on the widescreen with her arms splayed like that, singing, "The hills are alive." Picture my mother safeguarded, this truly happening instant. How could she not sing for it and spin? His mouth. 1. Have you thought about dying? This is the pulmonologist's voice from a room at the other end of the ICU. I can see a pair of loved ones just inside that portal, looking toward their someone in the bed who may answer with a quiet word or look. We can't tell. My brothers and I are waiting for the pulmonologist. We stand outside my father's room for 45 minutes, saying nothing, facing his sedated silence. When a baby is born in this hospital, Brahms' lullaby in digital twinkling murmurs from the intercom. 2 newborns arrive somewhere as we watch my father's chest rise and sink. Jagged lines trace the screen behind him. Excuse me. 2. His mouth pried open with tubes for his lungs and gut. He nods his head at the pulmonologist's questions. Does he want the tubes out? Does he know what that means? We are dismissed for 20 minutes. We return to his bed behind drawn goldenrod curtains. His mouth empty of plastic, gaped and free, his body unwired. My brothers tell me they see movement beneath the light blanket at his chest. I don't. And a little later on, a little later on in time, like phantom limbs. The Tiger Maplewood Bureau, for example, after it rolled into the Atlas truck, strapped and swaddled, a piece of inheritance. My parents have gone into photographs. The Bureau's vacant corner glances toward a remnant dining chair, my mother's post for table-struck dominoes. End of the home. Blanks of removed things. The dominoes, for example, sent to the charity store. A mirage of Christmas Eve suppers over the dining tabletop. After Atlas leaves, a son alone can make his body fill only one unwanted chair at one time. So, changing the mood a little bit, actually changing the mood a great deal. Or maybe not so much, but we'll see. I have such a common name. I really do. It's not John Jones, but it's a common name. And even when you put in my middle initial, it's still a common name. So I went online once to see what I could find out about this person who has this name. And we have autoparallel obit. David P. Miller was born in Cleveland, Ohio on June 21, 1919. He was the son of Bright Army and Lake of Bitterness. He marched for general contracting and taught in the public schools of Vine Capacity and Twig Portion. United in marriage to Brave Toy Bear, he wrote 2,000 umpire decisions. He passed away on August 26, 1907, aged 75 and 76. Pennsylvania Volunteers, 107th Regiment. The attitudes and philosophy of David P. Miller were girdled by the acronym ENCOURAGE. Extension, nosebreak, carpentry, orphism, undertow, remission, avidity, gloss, enervation. Although not religious, he is outlasted by children Crooked Nose, Warrior Elf, and One Who Tans Hides, a grandchild, You Herder, and eons of myriads. What was your experience working with David P. Miller? He was issued in San Jose on October 1, 1946, to the amusement of his family. He relinquished over 22 gallons of blood. He trickled down from Mayflower passengers. He moldered, renowned for his whistling, near Bell Valley at the age of 52. He divulged his belief in a force for good. Dew of the Sea, Dark River, Holder of the Heel, Florida convicted felon, grand theft firearm, best known for Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control and Blast Off Girls, attained the rank of Eagle Scout. Would you recommend David P. Miller to others? David P. Miller does not take on summer interns. He died Tuesday, December 20, 2011, after an extended illness. Do not send requests to be a summer intern. He will not take new graduate students until 2021 or 2022. Want a quote from David P. Miller? Assume the special values that named the fiber of his game, encourage, eventual, numerary, chafed, overwatched, uvular, rasorial, articular, geotropic, etc. There will be no visitation, tower, rose, king, or moon. There are several. That's the story. There's several poems. As I was putting the book together, I discovered there's several poems about porches, being on porches. So I appended the word porches to the existing titles of the poems. So here's one of them. It's another one of the season poems too. Porches, the Woodstock Country Inn, Bearsville. Tara annihilates mugwort stalks with vinegar spray. They brown from the base upwards. Vinegar wind profuses up to me on the porch. Something's pickled. Swallowtails, lightly exiled, flee abutting butterfly bushes. A speck-sized green spider hesitates to mount the edge of my notebook. The day heads toward 90. Laundry lifts in the light like Wilbur's angels. Pillowcases, bed sheets from the sleep of the Danish couple who shared Tara's pancakes across the table this morning. She works for the diplomatic service, he the Ministry of Defense. Denmark shovels 2/3 less GDP to defense than we do. We are not 3 times happier than Denmark. The laundry basket's white, the picnic table beneath the flowing maple, white. White wicker chairs decay genteel on our ivory and white overlook. We have taken the white room, everything like that, not sparing throw rugs. David Bowie rented this house 10 summers. Yesterday, a coyote at the border of grass and woods beyond the gravel car park. He allowed eye contact before shying off to the trees. Beyond butterfly bushes and perishing mugwort, the hill falls to an entire high garden of deciduous and evergreen, wedges of catskill. Sheets flap. A swallow on a dead branch flicks its tail. A bee makes itself heard on its course straight past my ear. I'm thinking of a man who had been, but was not the thin white duke, had been, but was no longer Ziggy Stardust at this porch glass table. The coyote wails from the hills beside him. It fell to earth, my first life on Mars, insisted from my high school FM in a plastic radio box, hippie station, faint from a distant city. Looks like we've got 2 more poems and time for saying, so off we go. Excuse me again. Sorry about that. What God knows. Leaves turned, not by a breeze in general, but by the exact wind of a gone moment, now dissolved across dead Evodia twigs and my demurely flaking skin. And do you consider how much of dust is made of fallen skin? It's not only that we return to dust, we are dust. Much as we want our brooms to cleanse the floor, the persistent scatter is us. Now reconsider each different breeze. When dead and merged with the Empyrean, perhaps with God, we'll know all zephyrs as the one zephyr there is. I'm done with fussing over what God knows. Only let me seize a dustpan of debris, settle myself on the morning's sweep up. The celestial part is God's, I guess, with spent Evodia branches left to the side. And we'll wind up with a poem about my father while he was living. I didn't mention that my parents retired to Florida in the late 90s. They were New Englanders up until then. Born and bred in Vermont, spent most of their lives in Massachusetts, most of their lives after marriage in Massachusetts, as I have. So Deborah, you're familiar with Florida, but Florida was new to me, and in some respects remained new to me up until the end. Anyway, this is titled Sunrises with My Father. 1. My father settled in a place where he could walk outdoors all year, made it his pleasure to help the old folks. Retired, but barely stepped across that definite senior discount line. He rose each Florida's pre-dawn, traced on foot the route the paper boys followed to fling the Sarasota Herald Tribune lightly at the ends of driveways. If these neighbors were the definite elders, my parents were numbered among the youngers. He knew the old, old ones by name, knew which of them needed their news carried to their porches. Warmth and moisture soothed his lungs, grown rasping with Massachusetts freeze. 20 minutes walk before the sun burst out with its own baggage helped to shrink a belly pointlessly enlarged. I wanted to know something about this, something beyond the tourist guides about this place. So easy, soft, and alien. Some mornings on our visits near the solstice, those shortened days, oddly considered cold, I'd rise and dress in darkness, shielding my wife's shut eyes against marauding light, fumble to the living room to meet him. Off we'd set, do-gooders at the end of night, returned for coffee as bands of red lifted above the roofs. 2. 20 years downstream, my father, a widower, one of the elder elders, still met the early hours before I cared to. I'd fumble out to meet him, his head crooked back on the rose-pink recliner, shut-eyed after first caffeine. The other old olds now fended on their own for headlines dropped at their driveway's ends. The younger elder, I stepped into light from one minuscule good deed, fetched the paper for his second waking, or his third. Thanks very much, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, David. I regret to say that I didn't start recording when I said I would. I guess I'm a little out of practice from taking the summer off, but I got into your second poem, David. So we've got most of it, and I was really interested in a lot of your words. I mean, to call a poem "What God Knows." Now that's ambition, right? And my parents have gone into photos. That just really touched me. And a friend of mine, you talked about The Sound of Music. A friend of mine, he would always say, "The hills are alive and they're eating the village." So next up, we've got, hang on a second. Here, okay, now I'm spotlighted. Next up, we've got Deborah DeNicola, who's the author of 7 books, most recently, The Impossible, that came out this year from Kelsey Press, Original Human, published by Word Tech Communications in 2010, and her memoir, The Future That Brought Her Here, in 2009. Deborah edited the anthology Orpheus and Company, Contemporary Poems on Greek Mythology from UPNE Press. Previous books include Where Divinity Begins from Alice James Books. Among other awards, Deborah won the Analytical Essay Award from Packingtown Review and the Santa Barbara Poetry Award, the first place award from Briarcliff Review Poetry Contest and Carpe Articulum's Poetry Contest, Barbara Bradley Award from the New England Poetry Club, and a special mention from the Pushcart Prizes. She is the recipient of an NEA Individual Fellowships Grant. Please welcome Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I also have a lot of poems about my late parents in this particular collection, of which I'm going to read a couple. I'm going to start with this because September 11th is coming up again, and many of us have our September 11th poems. Mine's a little different. It's called Rewind, and I got the idea after so many times seeing those on television, the buildings coming down and the plane going into the building. And it was just, like, oh my God, here it is again. And when I was younger, my brother used to run our family movies backwards. So we would see ourselves jumping out of the pool and landing on our feet. And so this is called Rewind. It's sort of wishful thinking. The walls of the two towers pick up their plaster and dust draws upwards into blue. Those who jumped don't, but blows softly up through open windows to sit at their desks intact. 200 firemen moonwalk back to their trucks, hang hoses up like warriors' swords as the running pedestrians stop, spin on their heels, stroll back through park and plaza shops. The melted church rights its ribs, pulls the roof back on like a hat, while fallen spires resurrect from blueprints. Both aircraft tanks siphon back flames of gas. Glass mosaic uncoils from debris, folds into steel archways. Two planes resume their flights to Los Angeles and Los Angeles as white exhaust feathers through morning, early and clear. 3,000 busy people loved by others, still right here. Gorgeous, that Indian summer sky. You remember that day, of course. It's a beautiful day. This next poem, I'm going to gloss a little bit with some words here. The word woivre, W-O-I-V-R-E, refers to the ley lines or the song lines under the earth where the water is when you go dousing. And morphogenetic is a physicist's term. It's a place that holds the energy of what happened there. And this poem kind of mixes up several different times in my life. It's called The Tree at Tiger Tail. Just off Route 1, before Tiger Tail Corner, there's a gargantuan banyan with limbs like Gothic buttresses. I step in, genuflect, walk the labyrinth of shadow, and I am once again at Chartres. No cars come by, the bells of birdsong cease, and all is pagan subtext. I am at worship, welling at the root with the woivre underground. Leaves of blue shoulder the spires, light sculpts itself into gates, as if the Madonna deep in the crypt, in sync with me, rejuvenates. And I don't know if I have penance or license here in Miami's medieval groves, where centuries flow and coalesce. Early in adolescence, safe behind the hedge of our suburbs' borders, I wandered with him to find a place to lie and kiss. There was no canopy like this, but we erected pleasure in the hammock of a willow. I would have sworn vows to the tree's virgin goddesses, but for the body's coveting touch, soft branching skirts that rush and juncture here and here. Though I have as much these years after lust, summoning rapture below and above. It took generations and scaffolds and fires, great wheels, Black Madonnas and Templar monks, lifetimes to raise that cathedral to its finish. And while clouds burn off, the tree at Tiger Tail reaches morphogenetic hallways, while the tablet of my hand glows alchemical, cobalt to emerald. His name was Jim. We were so very young, domed beneath that natural burgeoning, past the pillars into the nave. I came to Florida from Boston to take care of my mother because she needed help and grew in dementia for about 5 or 6 years, where I actually lived with her. So there's several poems in the book about her, and this is one. She collected those Yadro sculptures that were popular in the 60s and 70s. And this is called the Goose Girl's Foot. So she had the Yadro Goose Girl. The Yadro Goose Girl lay on the coffee table in Mother's living room for years. For years, she watched the clear martinis drain. She wasn't sad to be broken. She didn't mind time. She didn't mind change, just stared at the flower in her hand, its eternal blooming, and Mother adored her. Years later, deep in dementia, Mother tried to glue the foot back on with cold cream. That was before she stopped talking. That was when she could still walk, when she surprised us daily, soup poured into a wine glass. Soon enough, she lived in the fog of a body almost brainless. To lose a foot, to lose a mind, what creatures are we that parts of us break off? At the end, she shut her eyes for a week, shut lips, refused to eat. In the last hours, her eyes flew open, fixed on a point I couldn't contact, and a slight cry leaked from her silence while the lacrima mortis swelled down one cheek. I could see what work it was for her to die at 95, even with hospice nearby and morphine under the tongue. For hours, her skin incrementally purpled, the way her brain blackened as the million thieves swept in. While my mother labored into death, I wrung her mottled hands, hoping each breath would be the last. My mother, my rock, so whole, so gorgeous, gone to a ghost before my eyes. Good neighbor John glued the goose girl's foot back on the week after my mother died. Where I had failed, my fingers stuck together. He focused deftly, made that foot fit. And one more about my mom. By the way, I meant to explain the lacrima mortis is called the tear of death, and often people will just have one tear come down their cheek at the moment of death. And I got to see that. So this is called How to Face It. I empty my whisper into her ear each night with the 23rd Psalm, lower my voice into that cradle of death, pretend she remembers we traveled there together years ago, though in truth she remembers nothing, not Israel, the moon-cratered landscape, the black caves and lavender limestone, nor carnage at Masada, the outline of Herod's troops, a sickle in sand, not the treacherous Roman road under the hairpin turns of the tour bus, or how I put rocks in my pockets to take back to my Jewish friends. Here in the hospital, she's safe, she's home. At least the wallpaper here is a kind of green pasture. Here she floats above the still waters, but she can't roll over on her own, can't walk or eat or pee alone. She can't speak. Who would believe her eyes glazed in film since the stroke, that her brain flashes with recognition as I slip my fingers through her slim, boneless grip? I smile and squeeze, zoom in to tug at her smile, which happens. The sweet, upturned vine of her mouth happens on its own. She knows it's bath and bedtime. She's alert, a reptilian bird, sculpted bones of her face under crepe thin skin. I recall years of watching her dress, adding water droplets to a cake of mascara, then stroking in layered tears, then her lipstick brush lining and filling. I realize I love her most here at the end, as I love my own life for the first time, really, because she shows me how to trek the shadowed valley, how to live when you're almost dead. And I have one more Israel poem. This is called Qumran, which was a ruin, well, when we saw it, but the Essenes at the time of Christ were an early sect of Christianity, and they left Jerusalem and went out in the desert and built this community called Qumran. And there's a epigram from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, which says, Mary of Bethany asked him, will the thirst for knowledge ever be quenched? In the scriptorium ruin, I set foot in a life I knew as a recluse draped in a bone-white robe, sequestered from the city's first century sects. I remembered we hadn't fled to stone caves. We withdrew like a wave pulls from the sand. And we entered an ocean of desert, not far from the Dead Sea, where everything floats and even the salt breathes so remote, the only sounds were the quills scratching on parchment, recording Yeshua's alternate journey, the one with Magdalene as companion. We were so certain the kingdom was on its way, that each new day in our cursed world might be the last. That apocryphal light was rising behind the beveling sky's glass, where the future lapped at the edges of clouds. As I fingered stones in my pockets, I sensed the earth's hurts and walked up limestone steps leading to nothing but the remains of one wall. Under the spell of a scorching sun, an archway opened to a corridor with columns where the ghosts of Essenes, busy with bread and olives, busy with cisterns and clay cups, floated as if they could pull me with their touch through the frequency of 20 centuries passing. I closed my eyes and swayed my body in time with what I'd forgotten, as it held me in lustration so hot it mated with darkness, then transmuted, the way black contains the spectrum of color. I stilled myself there. Starlings squawked overhead, and when I heard Roman horses stop dead, I rushed into the present, came to myself blinking as the sky drew closer, and I knew in the way of gnosis, watched the translucent paths swim into the sea. Basking my face in the glow of what had dissolved, I was suddenly called with the other tourists to board the bus back to Jerusalem. I sort of had an out-of-body experience or something. Yeah, I was cried and cried when I got to that place. It was like I remembered something. Many of you might remember Barbara had a cat named Beauty.
Yes.
And this poem is called Beauty. And it has an epigraph, the death is the mother of beauty, Wallace Stevens. Beauty was the name of Barbara's cat who got torn apart by a dog, and Beauty's the name of the young girl who released a prince from his curse of fur by learning to love a beast. Beauty wins daily over brains in Hollywood and on TV, though some would say it doesn't last unless you're a cube of sky, the peak of a mountain, or a tropical wave, and even they must contend with shadows and clouds, especially when seen through the eyes of someone whose beautiful life's about to change. Even dark can be beauty, dark as in tragic, when what is rendered from loss exposes a wound that means something whole and perfect prevailed for at least a moment, and then it's a shimmering absence in space where once was an essence so mystical you could almost hear it pray. And you miss its deep sighing, the way Barbara misses her cat, a beautiful missingness, the way I miss the beasts who left me with longing, since beauty is always fleeting. We think we love for other reasons. Beauty alone doesn't earn true love, and there's a little beauty in that. But even death transmutes to beauty, casting a coil, a relic, shell, the concave stone that fits your thumb. Sunlight fading its palette, the hue of water pumped up from wells. We can mourn the loss of beauty, its warm pastels, its moaning knell. And this is called The All, which is all. Beneath the feet of arithmetic lie the 9 integers upon which the body of all measurement stands, the all, which is all. And I have waited a lifetime to meet it, that gentle containment, like the chalice of morning when the sun is just 10,000 centimeters behind the fog, that gravitational pull into balance. And now I'm waltzing from room to room, wearing the music of one seismic tone, reaching for my prayer book. Glory be to the numerals holding the chords of our firmament intact, light spectrum drumming, picture window beating time with linen roses on the sofa. So I recline between Latin syllables, between vowels of Psalms and the sighs of Isaiah, while you boil water for coffee, the oven of loving set to some safe estimation of Fahrenheit. There is a long sequence in here about my father's death and afterlife. which I, of course, imagined. Um, I lost my father when I was quite young, and I worked out some forgiveness in this poem. I'm just going to read one, which is when it's called Death's Dreams in the beginning, and it's moving into the after death. In the beginning, after the crash of the astral firmament, after the end of his three-dimensional world, above the fog of fragments and etheric arrivals, the old geometries dissolved, recombined into new alignment, and ruin departed, dragging its bag of grief. His breath quickened, and intimacy redeeming the air, and he sensed the ancient tinctures there, as if he were witness to the birth of extinct plants. Apparitions appeared in the river, over which hung trees, blossoming stars whose light shone like evening windows in his memory's home. Each awakening an invisible impulse entered his body's sleeve of chakras, those wells of magnetic photons snaking the temple empty of bones, where filaments glowed in a pillar of light, their source inexplicably known. And I think 2 months ago, I think you gave the reading of Alan Albert's poems, and after that night, I emailed one poem I had written to Alan, and Richard suggested I read it at my readings, so this is for Alan. It's called I Was Looking Into Your Eye. I was looking into your eye, looking into the tight skein of skin around your eye, the folds, a flake, a freckle, that 50th shift in the crow's feet, expanding bends and dents and shadowed gutters, then back to the rich copper, denuded eye, without the frame of its usual lens. How vulnerable it is, more so than from a distance when you are handsome and pensive, a bit out of focus. In the loft of your cheekbone, the mottled sun-spanked skin pulled at an intersection of pigment and damage. And your blink, that animal caged under scope, shrunken pupil, widened iris, the driven quest up a mountaintop to God. I loved it, that will to keep looking for. He was a dear person. And I just have two more short ones. This is another Florida poem. The thing I think I love most about Florida is the sky. The skies do amazing things with clouds, with light, and with color. This is called Tableau. On my mother's patio above the canal, I noticed a marriage in the clouds, not only loose doves, but small animals feeding each other, like Adam's hand clasped to the Lord's in the Sistine sky. I watched from the terrace. I saw the man cloud and the woman up high surrender and touch. An angel buoyed between them, like the reverend who witnesses the vows. I was witness. I saw Jerusalem palms loft into firmament, creation's first foreground, then an aisle of pageantry down which the clouds stepped and met, one towards the other. Male and female, he made them in the rose-tinted carpet of twilight, while completely oblivious, the rock and roll boats putted by. These boats go by. She was right on a canal, so the boats would go by with its, Rolling Stones playing. And this last poem's called Yoga Stardust, also a Florida poem. Does light serve as breath? How do the meshed colors of sky move inside to pump plumes through my lungs? My vinyasas on porcelain tile. A small chill tightens my hands, and I want the higher nothingness and the nothing in perfect balance with the fans grasping across from each other. Around me, the patio doors are open, dust of stars I am composed of. I go golden under this blue moon gloaming like the stars dunked in the canal. I am my atoms' patterned gleam, the poinciana scarlet, each molecule in that pile of mussel shells. I am fallen palm next to drying towel. A lizard skitters down the stucco wall, crosses my plasma painted toe, thinks it a hot rock to lie on. But I rise to warrior, gently wobble him off. Small pearl of peace curled like his tail, chi in my upturned palm. Thank you.
Were you also going to share some of Barbara's poems?
I picked out some, yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
You want me to do that now?
Yes, Barbara Helfgott Hyatt, who brought so many of us together and helped get, thousands of poems published and hundreds of books. And her new book is coming out soon, but we want to kind of hype it with some of these readings ahead of the publication next year.
Yeah, it's called Come Thunder, which is a wonderful title. And I remember some of these, especially the Atlantic City ones, in her morning free write classes. So I picked out some of the early ones. This one's called Report Card. Barbara is not a good citizen, Miss Bloom wrote. Aren't I the one who helps the others in cursive writing? Don't I always stand as proud as a flagpole on the auditorium stage on Veterans Day? Isn't that American enough? I am First Lieutenant of Safety Patrol, first girl ever to hold the post, busiest corner, Massachusetts Avenue and Pacific, spreading my arms out like gulls' wings. I glue my eyes to the light, red, yellow, me standing the tallest by green. Snap, and I turn sideways, waving my starched, gold-buttoned, gloved hand for the other school children to cross. Sometimes I have to count on Nick, the traffic cop, to stop a city bus for me. The whole world waiting, and I, the law's white harness, girl with a spitshine badge. When I say go, everyone does. Such a Barbara.
Yeah, that's great.
And this one's called One Sunday. One Sunday, I left the pigeons on the boardwalk, skated home, one hand in my shorts pocket with the folded handkerchief, my skate key on a shoelace tied in a bow around my neck. In the vineyard of this memory, it's a summer Sunday, and the neighbors are coming to hear my mother play her Schubert, and my father sing St. Louis Woman, accompanied by her, and his ukulele from the war. Late afternoon, everyone listening, sitting in the dining room on our kitchen chairs and borrowed folding chairs some had carried, brought from home. All of them staying after for my mother's famous coffee and hazelnut cake, and for my parents' ballroom dancing after that. He dipping her backwards, like in the movies, the Victrola in the living room playing softly, my mother's hair just washed and gleaming as breezy as it had ever been. My brother and I in the front row, side by side on the couch, both of us proud, perfectly grateful for this, his tapping fingers on his knee, my thinking about pigeons, wondering about how late is the love of birds, happiness, nothing less. I like how happy that one is.
Wonderful.
And from the third section, which is the, I'm going to say a little bit darker poems, this is a short one called The River Dure, which is in France, where she went often with her students and in the summers. And of course, in French, it means difficult or hard. The River Dure. I have come to suffer the bark-streaked world where toads call out in the river dark. All that effort to find one another, waiting wetly on river stones. The Dure renews itself by that sound, time taking itself so seriously. I will stay and be made of staying. Let the river, let the cold. There is too much world to fail. I will sleep the night, glad to be sleeping, glad to wake myself like always, like never before. No whispers, no breath on my neck. Let love wait like an umbrella in its stand. There may be no rain. There may be no need.
Mm.
So those were the three. It was hard to decide.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I want to mention that the readers can look in the chat, and there's a way that at the bottom where the three dots are, you can save the chat if you'd like to see what all the comments are that have been streaming by, that people have pointed out some of the phrases that you've done that really interested them or moved them. Also, Deborah has a video of the first, or one of the first poems that she read about the banyan tree. And you can look at that in a link in the same email that brought you here. And I thought when you mentioned Stardust, we were going to have some more David Bowie, which I always love. But we did get some Rolling Stones in there, and that was great. And all this talk of our parents and remembrance, it put me in mind of Franz Wright, who says, "How does one go about dying? Who on earth is going to teach me? The world is filled with people who have never died."
Oh, God.
And that notion of the tear just really struck me, almost like a thank you tear to what life meant and brought. So very, very powerful work. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you.
And we just have a handful plus one of people who are going to share a poem in the open mic. And I'm very excited to ask Jonathan Abel to start us off.
That's what I get for being impatient and dropping emails early. What a hard act to follow, both of you guys. I really loved the reading tonight, and God, what God knows, and rewind, and I just really wonderful. I'm going to read a poem that the literary magazine Please See Me picked up and published last month, called Life as an Oak at Recovery. Forenoon is a wholesomeness, wholeness the greening sun lifts from soil turned in the twist and chew of earthworms. Sunlight reaching through open branches, shaken by squirrels. Gypsy moth carried by a red-winged blackbird, a beak full of lunch. I walked the air, paper-winged. In nights revolve, the bats flicker, uneven in circles, frogs croak blue, trees charcoal-webbed by spiders. Dig me deep, that my feet can sink into turf, moral and wood ear, innumerous minutes, a blink of days.
Mm. Thank you.
Fine.
Next up, we've got my buddy Timothy Gager, who reminded me to record this. Special shout out. Timothy, it's fortunate to have him here because most Fridays he has the Dyer Literary Series. And I've heard some wonderful readers like Kim Adenagio and Nick Flynn. So take it away, Tim.
Oh, it's great to be here, and Deborah and David, you guys really killed tonight, so thank you for sharing your work. It's great stuff. Mine's really a very short poem, The Great Appearing Act. Some innovative perspective, love perspective, Life light, lifelines show on expressions in moments of reprieve, hope in moments of dismal life light. Fire is the most terrible of the elements. Bypass the bird struck, feathers in a breakdown lane. Life light depends on change, the charge of magic, the only science unaccepted by scientists. Life light exploding through darkness, we are honored to share.
Thank you. Next up, we have Gray Held.
Okay. Oh, thank you for this reading. I was just captivated, David and Deborah. I was just entranced. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to read a prose poem. I don't usually write prose poems. This is Trainscape number 9, the 3:10 p.m. southbound Richmond. As for the two separate side-by-side water fountains on the corner of Monument and Vine, we both refused to drink there, though we liked to look through the nearby shop window filled with pinstripe suits and white shirts, little loops on the back for hanging, and those clever plastic stays to help keep the starched collars nice and pert and in their proper place without complaining. We were unlikely friends, I suppose, me and Jamal, who lived with his father, the gardener, above the stables of the old Anderson mansion. But it was a neighborhood where all the kids went to parochial schools, except for me and my brother, who went to Hebrew school on Sunday mornings, but weekdays with Jamal to public school. But anyway, Jamal and I loved trains. We'd sidestep down the steep ravine just past back of Rossay Road to the railroad tracks, to search the gravel beds for orphan iron spikes to bolster our collections of rusty, roughshod remnants. Jamal was the one who'd listen for the distant whistle of the 3:10 p.m., rattling south from Fredericksburg, closer, closer, the locomotive, the slatted cattle cars, the tanker cars. I was the one who gathered stockpiles of rocks we'd both lobbed with precise timing so they landed onto the load of coal that brims the top of open hoppers. Whenever I stooped to pet Jamal's three-legged mutt, her damp black nose would nuzzle my face. She always ran alongside the train with us, three hobos hoping to hop a ride to somewhere. I didn't know back then those were slave-laid rails over which boxcars full of ammo and rations scuttled forth to support battle-weary graycoat troops. Our rule was always salute the caboose before dashing off to see if those copper pennies we'd steadied on glistening rails had obliged us, lest every trace of good old Lincoln's face erased. Sometimes we'd take off our PF flyers, take off our socks, go barefoot and balanced like tightrope walkers on those rails. If one of us slipped, both of us slipped. If he had his arms stretched out like wings, I had my arms stretched out like wings.
So much there. Unbelievable. Wow, thank you. Thank you, Greg. Next up, we have Pam Gem.
Thank you. What a fabulous night. Beautiful work. So this is a rather long title. My doctor wants it to go to a good family who can take care of it. He says, give it up. It doesn't have a father. I am 16 in 16 hours of labor. I fold my arms around me to cradle myself. The nurse ignores me until she looks under my Johnny to see if I'm crowning. Crowning? Why call a baby being born that? No blue blood, nothing royal, no gems. I'm a rock splitting. I refuse to lose my grip. Modest in this dim-lit labor, I want my mother, but the doctor won't let her in. I buck and beg for the saddle block. This is unhinged, hackled rapids, amniotic, white-capped combat, creak and crack, ravaged raft of me that harbors my baby. I'm stretched from stern to stem, attached to my placenta. The ample water unlocks the well of bloody blood. I offer up to them. I'm going to keep my baby. Thank
Mm.
you.
Wow. Oh, heavens. Yeah.
So brave, unbelievable, fantastic.
Thank you, Rich.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to let people know that I am not just an MC, but I also write poetry. And so I'm going to close this out. Thanks to everyone before me for giving me the courage to read this. It has not been workshopped. It was written on Star Island just a little while ago. Where he was. Before my father died, he hinted that he might. There were several breadcrumbs. No, don't fix my teeth. Aid my hearing. Give me new glasses. I'll be going soon. I needed to be told gently. I'll be getting flying lessons, harp training. I wanted to be as sure of transitions as he was. He calmly took on the task with the keenness of an Eagle Scout, which he was. One final badge. Comfort so deep, like the time I couldn't find him at the nature preserve. Not the bathroom, not the trailhead, until at last, in the parking lot, leaning on a lamppost, a piece of grass between the teeth he still had left, chewing the breeze like some little rascal grown old, turning to me nonchalantly, like he knew where he was, no dementia on him, that surely I'd come after being lost myself with these overly earthbound concerns, to find him where he ought to be, looking out from some mossy repose, sensing with confidence I'd always know where he was. Thank you.
Yay.
So, dear ones, it is with altered brainwaves that we have experienced this poetry tonight. And I'd like to invite, once I stop recording, that we might mingle a bit longer and speak to one another of our various journeys.